Hey, this is Darren from Property Prosperity. I thought I'd have a little chat to you today about talking to council. A lot of people, if they're looking at doing development or building or a whole pile of different things associated with development, they ring up the council, and a lot of people aren't really sure who they're supposed to talk to and what sort of questions they're meant to ask. So that's what I thought I'd go through today. The process that I go through when I'm having decisions on, as far as if I'm doing a subdivision or if I'm looking at building a home. Thanks for joining. So the first thing to understand, people talk about subdivision approval and they talked about planning approval, and planning approval basically is where the house is located on the block and some of those sort of requirements associated with that. And then there's building approval, which is sort of more about the structure of the house. So first thing to understand is, thanks for the like, the first thing to understand is subdivision approval is actually not the council at all, really. The subdivision approval is lodged to someone called DAC, which is the Development Assessment Commission. So you generally go through a surveyor and they'll lodge an application through to the DAC, Development Assessment Commission, and then they'll send that out to all the relevant parties. It just happens that one of those relevant parties, or one of those people that might be interested and might care, is the council. But basically there's a whole pile of other people that might interest too. They might be the SA Water and gas and electricity and Transport SA, and or it could be Heritage, could be Environmental Protection Agency, could be a whole pile of different interested parties that might care about a subdivision. So that's the first thing to understand. It's not necessarily when people talk about, I've lodged an application to subdivide with the council. You actually lodge it through the Development Assessment Commission, then it's forwarded through to the council for feedback basically, and then the council, just like all the other departments, they can review it and then they can approve it. And generally what they do is they'll conditionally approve it. So they'll approve it subject to certain other things happening. So with the council's example, they'll, it might be subject to you demolishing a house, or subject to you paying any council fees associated with it, or SA Water might be subject to you paying the SA Water fee, or you telling them where you want the water meter, a whole pile of different stuff. So that's the first. Hey John, thanks for joining. That's the first thing to understand. So when people are lodging an application for subdivision, it's not actually the council you're lodging it through, it's the Development Assessment Commission. Next thing though, and where I spend most of my time, I'm not as stressed about the subdivision approval side of things. They're usually pretty clear on the process involved with that. What I'm trying to think about is if it doesn't fit within the council guidelines, how am I going to try and get it approved if it's not going to fit? So that's where I come in, because basically what I'm looking at is planning approval. Because the thing is, if it doesn't fit within the minimum requirements as far as subdivision approval goes, you can actually lodge it through to the council directly and get what's called planning approval. And planning approval is just showing the development's going to work, like where the house is going to fit, how the car's going to get in there, the size of the backyard, all those particular things. That's the if you can show the development's going to work, which is essentially planning approval, then you're generally going to get subdivision approval. You will generally, because it doesn't really subdivision approval is just about dividing the block from 1 into 2 or 1 into 4 or 1 into 10 or whatever it happens to be. So really what they're caring about is making sure the development's going to work. And the reason they have minimum sizes for subdivision approval is because they know if they fit within those minimum sizes that you'll be able to fit a house in there. You'll have a decent backyard and a decent sized house. So if you're trying to do any less than that, they're concerned that it might not fit within their requirements. So that's where they come in with the if you can prove to us you can fit something on there, then we'll let you have subdivision approval, and that's where planning approval comes in. So I spend a lot of my time having a chat to council about planning approval, and so generally what people's process is, they usually ring up the council. So when you're ringing up the council, I suppose the thing you want to make sure is you're talking to a planner. Sometimes what happens, hi Vinu, thanks for joining. Sometimes what you find is that it's actually you're talking to like a receptionist, like someone at the front desk that may not actually be a planner, and they've got access to the same information as the planner, but they're not actually a planner. So the danger with that is they might just be reading off a sheet of paper, like a cheat sheet, and if they don't really understand your development in as much detail, then you might find that they might make a mistake and tell you something that may not be correct. So it is a preference to talk to a planner if possible, because they might be able to hint out in some nuances and things that maybe people hadn't thought about before. So that's the first thing. Just double check you're talking to a planner. The second thing is, you probably want to have a chat to them over the phone first, just to make sure. But again, if you're going to spend some serious cash on a development, which is going to cost you heaps of money, and particularly if you're going to buy a property, you want to make sure that you've got the right information. So I wouldn't rely purely on just talking to someone over the phone. Likewise, even worse, talking to your mate that says, oh yeah, you can subdivide that into 10. That's not advice. So I generally ring up the council. Double check you're talking to a planner, but even then you don't really know whether they're having a bad day and they've just made a mistake. So before you get, that's good for a preliminary sort of check, I suppose. The next stage will probably be actually go into council. Once you've had a rough idea, it looks like it makes sense, before you start spending some serious cash, maybe just go in there. When you go and talk to council, they generally have someone called a duty planner. So what that means is they have planners that work for them, and planners are basically people that sign off on the planning approval process. They'll rather than having multiple planners at various times talking to random people all the time, which gets a bit frustrating as far as they're concerned, and they don't get a lot of free time then, what they do is they have a different planner each day. And so each day they take turns, and who's going to be the person that goes and talks to the random people that rock up, and that's called a duty planner. So what you want to make sure is you're talking to the duty planner. The danger with that, you might find that you come in one day and you talk to one planner, who's the duty planner. You come back the next day, it'll be a different planner, who's a different duty planner. There is a degree of interpretation associated with planning approval. So the thing you got to bear in mind is that you might talk to one guy one day and you might say something, and you come back the next day and it's a lady and she'll say something different, and the next day is another guy and it's a different guy. And so potentially they could all say different things. In theory, they're all meant to say the same things, but where you're dealing with something which is a degree of subjectivity, then there's a potential that you may get different information, which is a bit scary. In reality, talking to someone over the front desk is not particularly valuable because it's not in writing. And you're not really going to know until you lodge an application. That's when the planner is going to put it in writing. They come back saying, yes, we'll approve your approval subject to doing certain things. Because they've written it in writing, they've made a statement saying if you do that, we'll approve it, then you know it's true. Whereas if you talk to someone over the counter and they say, hey, do this and we'll approve it, the problem is when you lodge your application, it might go through to a different person, and then suddenly that different person have a different interpretation and might create a lot of problems for you. And then before you know it, your application's been rejected when your initial feedback was that it would be approved if you did certain things. So in reality, they do have things called preliminary assessments where you can lodge an application in, before you lodge an application in, basically, you can show them your plans and they can give you a written feedback to say, this is our guidance. But even saying that, it still might go through a different person. They might have different interpretations. So in reality, the only way you're really going to have it in black and white, whether they're going to approve it or not, is to lodge an application, get feedback from council. Sometimes with my developments, when I know that I'm significantly less or it's a bit line ball as far as whether it'll get approved or not, then really I have to explain to the client. Then all we can really do is lodge it in, spend a few dollars up front to find out, and then we'll get what's called conditional approvals to do and spend all the money associated with the planning approval process. We just spend the least amount possible just to get some feedback from council, something in writing that says, yep, we'll approve it subject to you doing certain things. And from there on, we know it's going to get approved if we do those things. Then we can make a decision on whether we want to go ahead with it. So yes, so probably that's sort of my advice. So first thing is give them a call. Try and talk to a planner if you can. Then maybe go in there and have a bit of a chat. Even understanding that's not necessarily approved. That just means that that's their guidance on what you should do. But really, you're not really going to know till we lodge an application in and then get something in writing, I suppose. One other thing I will point out to people too is if you get to that stage before you've actually lodged the application, you want to double check stuff, I would advise you to get in there and have a look at the development plan. Development plan is basically the guides that the planners come off of, and that's a legal document. So that is illegal. So if that's what it's written in there, if you meet those requirements, then it should be approved. And but saying that, there is a lot of subjectivity in a lot of the wording of what they say, so it can be a little bit vague. And that's where I said that planners can have their own level of interpretation of what they believe is correct and not correct. So, but I would advise you to get in there and have a look at the development plan. Also, there's more detailed guidelines within the development plan for policy guidelines as well as zoning guidelines, and so they take precedence over the general guidelines in the development plan as well. So really have a good understanding of what policy area and what zoning area that you're in, just to make sure there's any other more detailed guides you have to look at. And hopefully that's made sense. They do have little information guides that you can get on the council's website and download as well. Those, they're probably the least valuable, I suppose, because they are very general. They don't apply specifically to your property. So I'd probably advise you just to give the counsellor a call. If you're just relying on the general information guides, I'd probably give the counsellor a call and just to double check that does make sense. And then likewise, before you spend any money, get in there and have a chat to one of the planners and just make sure that's what your understanding is correct before you start spending, thousands and thousands of dollars. So hopefully that's made a bit of sense to you guys. And if you've liked what I said, then click on the like button. If you haven't liked what I said, then still click on the like button because I really appreciate it. And if you know someone that's trying to lodge for approvals and they're trying to understand the whole process, then click on the share button. I'm sure they might find this interesting. And if you've got any questions for future, then more than happy to help out. And so put a little question in the comment box, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thanks, guys. I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks, John and Vinod and Claire for joining, and thanks for the great feedback, and I'm glad you're enjoying it, and I look forward to talking again next time. Bye.